Welcome back. Well, there's been a bit happening on the political front, as you've noticed. While the Labor rabble get their act together, one of the most active members of the coalition economic team has been busily holding them to account, not giving them a minute. Our favourite Liberal Senator from Western Australia, Shadow Assistant Treasurer Matthias Cormann. Welcome back to the show.
Good to be back.
I have to ask you just to sum up, you don't get too much of a free kick, but how are you feeling about things at the moment? Because to be fair, it's all very well to kick the Labor side for what's just a debacle, but unfortunately, I think it's having a bit of effect on all politicians. People tend to say that lot in Canberra, all of Canberra. Does it upset you a bit that all politicians are looking like a rabble?
Look, I mean, we've got a sharp contrast in Canberra now. We've got a strong, united and disciplined team led by Tony Abbott, which has been working for the last 4 years on an alternative plan for Australia, to a plan for a stronger, more prosperous economy, a safer, more secure Australia. And then, of course, we've got a deeply dysfunctional, divided, chaotic team, which, you know, with a recycled, failed Prime Minister in Kevin Rudd. I mean, I'm not surprised that people are disillusioned by what's been going on in Canberra. Of course people are disillusioned. I get that message every day. I guess what I would say to people is, you know, there is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and even though Kevin Rudd is trying to run away from the election date that was set by his predecessor, there will be an election. Ultimately, Kevin Rudd will not be able to run away from it, and there will be the opportunity to elect a better government.
OK, there's your free kick. Now, just on that election date, maybe another one, there is some dispute on how much it's impacting business. I think a lot. What do you make of the excuse that September 14, it was because of Yom Kippur? Is this really all about the ego of strutting the world stage? And is, as the BCA said on Monday, that is not a good enough excuse. What happens here in Australia and jobs and business confidence is more important than that G20 stage.
Well, look, I mean, economic conditions globally and domestically are very challenging. We ought to have a government with its eye on the ball, focused on making Australia more productive, more competitive, cutting taxes, cutting spending, cutting the waste, and of course providing certainty. I mean, having had the longest election campaign in history, of course has added to uncertainty at the worst possible time. But the small little bit of certainty that we did have under Julia Gillard, which was an election date on 14 September, Kevin Rudd even took that certainty away. Of course, it's in our national interest to have the election sooner rather than later. The 3 years of the term of Parliament are up on the 21st of August, and the election should happen as soon as possible around about that date. And if Kevin Rudd was focused on the national interest instead of his interest in being at the G20 in St. Petersburg in early September, then I mean, he would call the election sooner rather than later.
Let's talk about the Treasurer. You often commented on the abilities of Wayne Swan. We haven't heard too much because all the focus is about Kevin. What do you think of Chris Bowen as a Treasurer? Worse, better than Wayne Swan, or all the same?
Well, it's very hard for anyone to be worse than Wayne Swan. I mean, Wayne
so you're
Swan,
saying something nice. Chris Bowen might be better.
Well, I mean, I think the jury is out. I mean, you know, Chris Bowen is yet to get his feet under the desk properly. I mean, like, let me say that my general view of Chris Bowen is certainly a more optimistic view than my view on Wayne Swan. But of course, the problem that Chris Bowen has is that he's part of a fundamentally bad government, and all of the failures of the Gillard government had their beginnings in the Rudd Labor government in its first iteration, whether it's the budget mess, whether it is the mining tax fiasco, whether it is the border protection fiasco. So, I mean, the question really is whether Chris Bowen, however good or bad or indifferent he is, how much of an impact he'll be able to have before the next election. But let me just, you know, make the point again. Nobody could be as bad as Wayne Swan. Wayne Swan was the worst possible treasurer for us to have at a time when really
getting us through the GFC and ending up with an economic record that's the envy of the world?
Well, that is not quite right. I mean, I know that is a spin that comes from the Labor Party.
No,
I mean, Australia...
it's pretty well the numbers speak for themselves. Don't you give him any credit for those figures? Unemployment, our growth, they are still the envy of the developed world. The OECD is not a spin doctor for Wayne Swan. Do you give him any credit? Can you ever give any credit to the last government?
Well, Janine, I mean, let's just make a few things clear. I mean, the situation in Australia in 2007 was very different from the situation across Europe, the UK or the US. I mean, unemployment levels were much higher, their public debt position was much higher. You've got to remember the position that Wayne Swan inherited as Treasurer. No government net debt, a $20 billion surplus, very low unemployment. I mean, if anything, we were facing the pressures of growth in the economy. There was significant capacity for the Reserve Bank through monetary policy to provide strong economic stimulus efficiently when the global financial crisis hit.
That's all history, but wouldn't you say the fact that we're not in a recession today? I know, but you do tend...
No, you're asking me to reflect on Wayne Swan's record, and the point I'm making is this. Firstly, he inherited a very strong starting position. Secondly, the Reserve Bank had significant capacity to do the heavy lifting. Thirdly, we had the best terms of trade in 140 years. Even today, the terms of trade, even though they've come off a bit, the terms of trade are still 15% higher than at their highest under the previous government.
Okay, one thing though, we're not in recession today. How can he be the worst treasurer if we are not in a recession and haven't been under his watch? Let's just take that as a guide.
Because Australia has been in such good shape, and we have been in such a we've benefited from the exposure to the Asia Pacific, in particular China. Not even a treasurer as bad as Wayne Swan was able to take us down to the same levels as of course have been experienced in other parts of the world.
I'll give you credit for still claiming credit 6 years later. One question I want to ask:
No, it's not just us. I mean, it's obviously the strong economic. I mean, the best terms of trade.
How many years though can you keep claiming responsibility for the economy now?
Well, it's not a matter of claiming responsibility, Janine. I mean, it is a matter of historic credit. Well, I mean, there's no doubt that we had a stronger starting position. I mean, obviously, we're not claiming credit for the strong performance of the economy in China. I shouldn't have given you an opening to go backwards. That was a good fortune.
Let's go forwards. I've got a couple, and if we can keep the questions tight. I won't even ask you how worried are you about the polls, because I know the answer you'll give. You're very good on message. What I want to say is, can you assure the Australian voters that your party won't do what the ALP did and panic about polls and start reacting, that you'll stay where you are? I mean, is there any fear you might start changing policies or get spooked? Some of your members might.
Janine, the coalition, unlike the Labor Party, has gone through a very methodical, a very professional process over the last 4 years. We've developed policy. We're very clear on the direction that we want to take Australia in. We're completely united behind our leader, Tony Abbott, who, if he's given the opportunity by the electorate, will be an outstanding Prime Minister for Australia. I mean, we will. The short answer to your question is no, we will not get distracted. We're very clear on the direction that we think we need to take Australia in, and we hope to get a mandate from the Australian people whenever the election is
That would be very encouraging to the voters to know that you're a party that's not going to react to those polls. It's a short honeymoon period. Couple of quick questions. You've been very busy. You're the most active member of the opposition. You keep up the good fight. You've put out a lot of press releases about Bill Shorten. I think the main one I found interesting was that you felt that they downgraded superannuation and his portfolio. He's a busy man now.
Well, Bill Shorten has had a pretty bad track record in financial services and superannuation. Essentially, his job was to look after the interests of the union movement while he was, while he was in the portfolio. He has failed to ensure that there is genuine competition in the so-called default superannuation market for people who don't make active choices in relation to their super. He's prevented improvements in corporate governance arrangements for industry funds, even though they were recommended by his own Cooper review into superannuation. He was part of a government that has increased taxes on superannuation by almost $9 billion after, of course, promising that they would not make any changes to superannuation. So, I mean, look, Bill Shorten has been a very bad Minister for Financial Services and Superannuation, but now all we've got is an Assistant Minister for Financial Services and Superannuation. All right,
a couple of other quick issues. ATO Chief Chris Jordan today continued the campaign about cracking down on companies that try and, especially multinationals, that try and get away from their tax obligations. Is this a fight, and there's a bit of a global push on a moment, is this a fight you endorse and you'll support if you get into government?
Well, you know, we have been very supportive of Chris Jordan's appointment as tax commissioner. Obviously, you know, when it comes to pursuing companies that avoid their tax obligations, of course, I mean, that's his job, and it's a job that he does independently from the political level of government. And of course, we support him pursuing those that are not fulfilling their legal tax obligations.
Okay, so you'll support that. There was some indication maybe because in the budget they were cracking down, but in general, in theory, the bigger picture, you support him on this.
Well, I mean, obviously, I mean, if you're putting to me that the tax commissioner is making sure that companies, you know, fulfil their legal tax obligations, then of course we support that.
Good to hear. Well, it's good to talk to you again tonight. As I say, you do keep up the good fight. You do hold the line, and do hold the line. Don't be spooked by polls. We voters don't want to see that anymore.
No worries, I won't.
Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you again.